Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Evolve to Win show. This is Heather. Today, I'm talking about how to be less stressed out during the holidays, or maybe even said better, how to be more happy. Now, I understand that for many, many people, holidays can be really stressful. And I want you to be thinking about, for you, where does that stress come from? So, for many people, it's because you're in a time of year that is meant to be where you connect with family and loved ones. And many of us have lost loved ones along the way. And so, that in and of itself can be extremely stressful. It can be emotional, it can be painful, or it can be a time to really remember those who we loved who are not able to be with us during this holiday season. So I know for many of you, that's tough, especially if it's very recent for you. And there are also others who are stressed out just because there's so much to get done. It's year end and you're trying to balance everything. You're balancing your work life, you're balancing your family, you're trying to get ready for holidays. Maybe you're hosting or even traveling somewhere. So I think that the busyness starts to escalate for a lot of people. And then let's just talk about the family. So this is a time to connect with family, and possibly for you over the years, your family dynamics and relationships maybe have shifted. And it is not uncommon that there are family members who struggle being together. So whether that's because there have been issues in your relationships over time, there are so many different opportunities for those issues in relationships, but I like to think about it like this. I want you to think about, for every relationship that you have in existing relationships, where there are issues, where there are challenges that you've had in that relationship, where things just aren't working for you. I want you to consider that every time there has been any sort of breakdown in a relationship that hasn't been cleaned up, imagine that's like an anchor that you're carrying around. Now, depending on how many different issues you've had in these relationships, you might actually have multiple anchors. And maybe you've been carrying these anchors for so long that they're feeling really heavy for you. And we all have different size anchors too, right? And that has to do with how much emotion we put in to the issues that we've had in these relationships. So just visualize for a moment, if there's one relationship that you have that you really struggle with, that you possibly are carrying multiple anchors around, and maybe some of these anchors are really, really big. Some of them probably even have barnacles because they've been carried around for a long, long time. So the reason I like that analogy is that we are the ones who choose whether or not to carry these anchors. And I know that it seems like the anchors that you're carrying are caused by the other person in the relationship. I want you to just consider looking at it from a different perspective and consider that the anchors that you're carrying are potentially being carried by your choice. Or maybe said a different way, maybe you failed to choose to release those anchors and let them go because you're the one who's bearing the burden of the weight of the anchors, and only you can release them. Okay, so just consider that. So how do you release those anchors if you choose to? Well, part of it is just making the decision about whether or not you're tired of carrying them around, right? Are you, what's the impact on you for bearing the weight of those anchors? So the opportunity really is to decide whether or not to let it go. And in letting those anchors go, in some cases, you may need to actually have a conversation and just clean something up. Now, what's really interesting is I learned a technique years and years ago that allows you to clean up those relationships in a very, very simple process. And I'd like to share that process with you. So the first thing to look for is that there's something going on in your relationship right now that you're pretending. Okay, so if there's something that's broken and something that's not working, if you haven't actually put it out there on the table and addressed it directly, then that means that you're pretending, at the very least, that everything's okay. And yet you both probably know that it isn't okay, right? So there's some sort of pretense, some sort of inauthenticity, some sort of mask that you have on, right? So as an example, maybe I'm making somebody else wrong for something. Maybe they did something and I judged it and I made them wrong for it. And I'm in a place of being right about it. Now, you're listening to this right now and you're like, well, but they were wrong and I am right. And I get that. Like from your perspective, whatever happened, I'm sure was wrong in your mind. I'm sure it was. And yet, if you really take a look at what happened and you remove yourself from the scene and look at it with your wisdom, because you're wiser now than you were at the time, just ask yourself the question, did the other person make a mistake? Because chances are really good if somebody did something that was harmful to you in some way, they made a mistake. And maybe they've apologized for it and you haven't accepted it, or maybe they haven't even apologized and they don't see it as being wrong. But I would just ask you to think about whether you've ever made mistakes in relationships and if you'd want other people to forgive you for those mistakes. So there's an opportunity now to just allow forgiveness for whatever's happened. And, I learned long ago, actually back in 2001, that forgiveness is not because you think the other person deserves it necessarily. Forgiveness is more about just allowing you to let go of feeling the need to judge. So, for me, I really, really struggled with forgiveness in a past issue that happened years and years ago, where I really was very, very angry and I blamed somebody and I didn't know how to let it go. And actually, I'll just say it because it was a big deal. And if you have, some major issues that are going on in relationships in your life, maybe you'd appreciate this. So back in, let's see, that it was 1985, a good friend of mine, Christie was murdered. And that I know this is a very heavy topic, and I didn't even think that I was going to share this, but I am. So here it is. So that was a very difficult time. And for a lot of years, I was extremely angry and extremely bitter. And of course, you can imagine that I judged the person. Now, we didn't know who it was at the time. They didn't, the police didn't know who did it until almost 30 years later. And they finally did arrest and convict the person who was responsible for her murder. But it took, from 1985 until 2001, when I finally went through a coaching program to help me understand this whole concept of forgiveness. The program was not about that, but that's one of the things I got from it. That's when I recognized that for years, I had been carrying this massive, massive anchor of anger and hate and fear and all sorts of negative emotions, but primarily anger. And, I would have people over the years talk to me about forgiveness, and I would say, no, an eye for an eye. And that's just the way it goes. And I was just convinced that that person needed to pay for what they did and that I would personally hold them responsible. Now, in 2001, when I really understood, when I was taught by someone that forgiveness is not necessarily for the other person because it's deserved, it's not saying that what this person did was right. It's not even saying it was okay. It really was just saying that it's not up to me to be the one to judge and hold that person responsible, that I have the ability to let that go and not hold on to all of those negative emotions. And trust me, there were plenty. And I didn't even realize it, what the impact was because I had been carrying it around for so many years. It wasn't until I released it that I recognized how much that was weighing me down. So I know that doesn't maybe resonate with you or relate to you so much about how you're going through the holidays, but I got to tell you, there were a lot of years that I went through the holidays and I was still carrying that anchor. I was still carrying that anchor. And even if it wasn't right there on the surface, it impacted me over the years. And I would ask you to really think about what are some of those anchors that you're carrying that are impacting you day in and day out? And is it worth it? Is it worth carrying it around? Because you're the only one who can make that decision and decide whether or not to release it and to let it go. Now, there are going to be people who just are stuck in this place of like, no, it's not okay. And I'm not going to release it and I'm not going to forgive. What you're essentially saying there is you're saying, I'm going to continue to bear the weight of this negative feeling, of this judgment, of this anger, of this hurt, of this pain. And I suppose the good news for you is you get to do that for as long as you choose to do that. And it's totally 100% up to you. But I invite you to actually consider what that would be like for you. In my case, when I forgave in 2001, I did not get to have a conversation to complete with anybody. I just made the decision. We still didn't know at that date who the person was who did it. And yet I was able to release fully. Now, I actually wrote a letter, and that helped out a lot. And so I did the releasing there. But at that same time, I also recognized that there were a number of other relationships in my life, even if they seemed to be okay on the surface, where I was still holding on to past issues, past hurts, past complaints. And so one by one, I just started releasing those anchors. In some cases, I needed to have a conversation and fully let it go. In other cases, I just let it go. And what was so interesting is when I did let it go, even if I didn't have a conversation, the relationship actually started to look different. Things started to change. Wayne Dyer was the one who said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's totally true. So even if you're not ready to have that conversation, if you don't feel comfortable having it, consider just for you what it would be like to release and then go into the holidays without carrying the weight of that burden and just being present and in the moment. So it's like taking your past out of your present, putting it in your past where it belongs, and just being there in the moment. And, I think part of it too is this forgiveness is, I think, a way of almost paying it forward for in the event that you make a mistake at some point. The hope is that someone else would let it go and just recognize it was a mistake. So that's a big piece, I think, of getting through the holidays, is just recognizing where that stress is coming from and what's weighing you down. And a lot of times it has to do with relationships and things that are incomplete. Now, in the event that you're dealing with issues, maybe currently, let's say that you've got somebody in your family who tends to run a little negative. I like to call that person a negasaurus. That's the technical term, right? So you've got a negasaurus somewhere in your family, or maybe it's a spouse, or let's hope not, but somebody who's close to you, who's going to be around, and they feel like they just drain your energy. So if that's the case, I've got a foolproof technique that you can use where you won't even skip a beat and they won't drain your energy. So here's how it goes. When anytime you're thinking in a positive way, you're vibrating, resonating, your feelings are positive, right? So what happens is you think a thought, and from that thought, your unconscious mind goes into vibration. It's called the law of vibration, okay? The vibration that happens shows up for you as a feeling. So if you're thinking positive thoughts, you'll feel positive feelings. If you're thinking negative thoughts, you feel negative feelings. Now imagine you walk into a room and it's Thanksgiving and you see the long lost somebody, right, who happens to be running a little negative, and you feel that negative energy. You know what I'm talking about. Even if they don't say something, you can feel it if they're thinking negative thoughts and they're in a negative space. So what most people do is they reduce their vibration to meet the negativity. Like instead of just staying happy, you go, oh my gosh, this person, right? Instead of doing that, here's what I want you to try is I want you to try holding your ground and just staying in that positive place where you're absolutely still thinking positive thoughts and you're resonating in this positive emotion. Because what's going to happen is if you have this person who's in a bad place, trust me, they don't want to be there. They really don't. They probably don't even know they're there. Or they don't know they have a way out of it, but their way out of it is actually you. So if you stay vibrating at this high vibration, this positive vibration, this person who's in a negative space can only do one of two things. They can either change their mind, change their attitude, change their thinking, which will raise their vibration to a positive place, or they have to leave the room because they can't be together with you. Now, either way, it's okay. It's actually really good. So that's really the response. And I know it sounds kind of simple and it might even sound like there's no way this can work, but I promise you it works, and it works every time. So all you have to do is hold your space, hold your ground, hold your vibration, keep your thoughts positive. If you struggle with how to keep the thoughts positive in the face of a negative person or circumstance or situation, one of the things you can always do is go to gratitude. That is 100% guaranteed to keep you in a positive place. In fact, you cannot actually be in a negative place while you're in a state of gratitude. It's not possible. Those two states cannot exist at the same time. So all you have to do is stay in the place of gratitude. And even if you can't find something in the moment that you're grateful for about that other person, that's okay. Be grateful about anything in the moment. Like, one of the things I think about are my puggles. I have 2 dogs that I absolutely adore. And if I'm ever struggling, if I just get into a bad place for any reason, if I think of them, I literally can either go find them and hug them, or just pull up a picture of them on my cell phone. And that is enough to guarantee put me in the right frame of mind and a positive frame of mind, make me happy. The other thing you can do is go put on some really good music, play a song that you love, and that almost always works too. So hopefully those are a couple of tips and tricks that will help you in terms of relationships and how you get through some of the trying times that you might face. Gratitude is guaranteed. So even if you're in this place where maybe you can't be together with somebody over the holidays and you're sad and you miss them, or you've lost someone recently and they can't be with you, that's another thing, is just as you're feeling that sadness or that loss, do what you can to get more intentional about going back to gratitude and remembering the great times and remembering the things that you love about that person. Okay. Last thing I want to say about the holidays. One of the other reasons that we start feeling really, really stressed is because we're not getting enough sleep, right? Our sugar intake, our alcohol intake, we kind of might overdo it during the holidays. And when sleep goes, then the immune system is compromised and then you get sick, which is no good. So the other thing I'll say is just do whatever you can to get as much sleep as you can. I'm not going to tell you what to do about your diet. You get to do whatever you want and enjoy yourself. But if you can at least make sure you're getting enough sleep and hydration, that's going to change a lot, because your cortisol levels, if you're stressed out, are going to be going through the roof and things are going to be going haywire otherwise. So get your sleep, and that's going to help you too. Anyway, I hope that the holidays for you are just amazing this year. And I do hope that you get to connect with people, maybe even in a different way, in a better way than you would have otherwise, if you really think about whether you need to cut some of those anchors. So, have some really great holidays coming up. And if you liked this, please share it. And otherwise, the one other thing I wanted to say to you is that if you are coming up at the end of the year here and you do not currently have a system that you're using that's really helping you to focus on those relationships and build those relationships, we are just releasing this week, in fact, our 3-part mini course. And part of this 3-part mini course is it's designed to help you in 3 specific areas of your life: personally, professionally, and in your relationships. So, when you've done goal setting programs in the past, or when you do, if you have a system that you use currently for goal setting that you really like, I would ask you whether that system includes a part on relationships. Like, are you actually setting goals in the relationships that are most important to you? Even in the relationships maybe that have been broken over time and you haven't actually gotten intentional about how you want to make a shift. So if that's not part of your existing goal setting system, please download our free 3-part mini course. You just have to go to winthequarter.com, and we're going to teach you to set those goals for 1 year out. And then you're going to set your action plan just for 90 days time. So if you were to do that right now, do you know that you could actually get into action and have 2 of the 3 videos complete before Thanksgiving? So winthequarter.com. Thanks for tuning in for the Evolve to Win show, produced in partnership with Gulf Shore Business Magazine. Have an awesome day.